So, good evening. Tonight is the continuation of the video from yesterday with the second topic. That was the Munich Security Conference, J.D. Vance's speech there, and what kind of evolved out of this. And I think in order to understand the reason of why J.D. Vance gave the speech he gave, I have to go back a little bit here. Since I am in the United States, I have lived here for 35 years continuously. And so to give you a better understanding of what we're looking at, I'm following the news, like I've mentioned in my other videos, over in Europe, primarily the two main German TV stations, ARD and ZDF. Then several, especially newspapers, Le Figaro in France, Financial Times in London, the Bild Zeitung, unfortunately now and then just to see what they tell the populace, and Die Welt, Spiegel, Stern, FAZ, and Süddeutsche Zeitung. These are the primary ones. And then at least once or twice a month I read the ND Aktuell, that is Neues Deutschland, for the communist side, what they're thinking and how they feel about stuff, just to get an idea. And the Zeit, that is the news magazine or newspaper, not really, I don't know if they're published daily or weekly, but the Zeit is more closer aligned with the Social Democrats. So I got a pretty good idea then of what goes on in Europe, at least in Central Europe. And I pick up some Die Weltwoche in Switzerland, which is a more nationalist, right-wing organization, very Swiss, I have to say. They're very nationalist people. And I've been to Switzerland, and I have friends here in Kansas City from Switzerland who are Swiss citizens. And so I'm kind of used to this, and we're getting along pretty well. But now to understand this, I have to go back a little bit in history, and it might be monotonous to listen to this, and you're going to wonder why I'm explaining this. Bear in mind that what we're seeing now, is the accumulation of political development in the United States for more than 50 years, more like 60 years, 62 years. And the whole thing started with John F. Kennedy. And so when we go back into that time frame with John F. Kennedy and then Lyndon B. Johnson, who took over after him, both Democrats, they set America on a financially very tricky path, because at that point, the United States dollar was backed by gold, physical gold, at an exchange rate of 35 US dollars to 1 ounce of $9.99 gold, fine gold. And that was basically a disaster in the making. It started with Kennedy getting involved in Vietnam, and that escalating to a full-blown war, for one, which became very costly to the United States. And then the second was after the assassination of Kennedy, which we are supposed to be getting the full documents of the commission who investigated this without any kind of, blacked out parts of it where we can read everything. We will see what was really behind that, and then Lyndon B. Johnson taking over. Lyndon B. Johnson came into the office, and he started a program here in the United States which was called the Great Society. And with it came a tremendous amount of government debt, spending on impoverished people here in the United States, welfare programs, and they did the projects, what we call the projects, that is public housing in the large cities, Detroit, Chicago, New York, and several other cities, they got those projects. And for the predominant black community at that time, or African American community. And that had gotten so expensive, and then Kennedy's quest to fly to the moon, that came at a very hefty price tag too. This entire NASA Apollo program, with everything what came with it, the costs were just staggering. So by the time the United States voted Nixon into office, the financial situation was pretty bad in terms of a spiraling inflation and the costs, plus then the oil shock, because the dollar had gotten so far devalued that the OPEC countries, which were not fully organized but were just beginning to organize, were basically raising the oil prices significantly, which caused an oil shock in the early 70s and then later in the mid to late 80s again. But this is basically where this all originated. And then Nixon took the United States off the gold standard. That means that the gold was now freely exchangeable, and we went from $35 per ounce back then, at the time when he took this off, to a almost $3,000 per ounce at the current exchange rates, with London trading higher than the United States at the moment for bullion gold. That is important, but I don't want to make this part of this video. This allowed the United States basically to borrow money with a self-imposed debt ceiling. That means Congress has to raise the debt ceiling. It's like when you get a credit line increase on your credit card so you can go higher with your spending, and then when you max this out, you cannot put anything on there until you start paying it down, basically. Or you call the bank up and say, well, I need a higher credit limit. And this is basically what we had since. The debt ceiling at the moment is at $36 trillion, and we're basically maxed out. This now is part of the entire issue, is those $36 trillion have been spent basically pretty much since 1962. And it has accumulated and accumulated. Bush, with the two wars, we had Afghanistan and Iraq. You had Obama, who borrowed a lot of money too for his programs he wanted to do to save the planet with the green stuff and all of those things. And now Biden gave it the final death blow, basically, in the 4 years he was in there, where they added almost $7 or $8 trillion in debt, causing the inflation we're having now. In this whole scheme, the expert had calculated that the maximum inflation the monetary system could sustain was about 2%. That is an arbitrary number, but over the long run, it has worked out that that provided the most amount of stability without wages going up too high and cost of living increases, going too high for the average person to be able to cope with all of this stuff. So one can catch up with the other, and in the end, you're inflating everything. This is part of the monetary system, so we're basically inflating the debt, then we're inflating the inflation, then we have more debt available to us. The point is, we are now at a point where the budget of the United States is roughly, I think, $4 or $6 trillion. Trillion has 12 zeros. 12 zeros. And just this year, we will have to pay $1 trillion out of this budget to service the interest payments on those $36 trillion we have accumulated. That is a mind-boggling amount of money. Now, 70% of this debt is owned here in the United States by Wall Street, by banks, by investment groups, by private citizens, all across, and by the Federal Reserve System. That means the Treasury prints the money, so to speak, and then the Federal Reserve buys it and gives it to Congress. So it's like a wash system. This is why the system in itself can never go bankrupt. So when you have a country printing debt in their own currency, like we do this, we're printing the debt in United States dollars, which means we can print the money to pay for it. The problem with this is that you increase the amount of money in circulation and it becomes inflationary, more and more inflationary. It can cause, in the Weimar Republic, that model caused a hyperinflation. At this point where we are with 3% roughly of what they're estimating, which is still too high, devalues your possessions. That means when we said that a ounce of gold was $35 in 1972 and 1973, when Nixon took the United States off the gold standard, and it is 3,000 today, then you basically are getting exactly the inflated of the amount of money, of currency, rather, adjusted for inflation. That's how you have to look at this. And in order for this to kind of to get back into a balance, because at one point or another, the government, in this case Congress, who borrowed this money or has to borrow it from the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, has to pay the interest on it, and the interest payments are supposed to be coming from our tax payments. We're paying the taxes for it. So out of every dollar I spend, 25 cents go to Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security because they're underfunded. 25 cents of this goes now to debt repayment, or only the interest payment. We haven't even started talking about paying down the principal. And the other 50 cents is basically the defense budget for the U.S. military and all the other spending together. But they're taking in only about $2.5 to $3 trillion per year in taxes. So they have already a $1 trillion shortfall, and that is projected to get even bigger. So now we have Trump and Musk in this equation, and that's what they ran on. They didn't explain it like this because we don't want to talk about the United States of America going bankrupt. Technically, we cannot go bankrupt, but we will come to a point where the interest payments will basically have to be paid from the entire tax revenue coming in if this keeps going like this. That means there is no more money left or currency left for any other thing for the country. Whether it's social programs, whether it's the military, policing, nothing couldn't be paid. It would be all eaten up by the interest payments. Anyone who knows how to balance a checkbook will understand that at one point or another, this game is going to be over. And this is why Trump, of course, is trying to get now the Federal Reserve to lower the interest rates back down to zero, because that will immediately start to shrink the interest payments we have to make. That will lift a huge burden off the country collectively. In his quest to save the United States, not just making America great again, but in the quest of saving the country literally from itself, they had to go through and figure out what all of the spending was, because a lot of this money which was spent, like these $8 trillion, what Biden spent in these 4 years, for the better part, has not reached anything here with the ordinary people. Like we have the hurricane victims in Georgia, in North Carolina. They haven't seen any money yet in terms of help, federal assistance for their losses. There's still a lot of things in disarray over here. And this is part of it, why the populace has voted the way we have voted. That Musk is now involved in this is one thing. Musk, Zuckerberg, those people primarily, these two, since they're running X and, Facebook and Instagram, are the two platforms of social media which are being manhandled, at least that's how they feel, by the European Union and by individual countries in terms of freedom of speech and everything else. So the regulations which are coming in that sort of stuff, so they have an interest in this, a self-sustained interest in their companies, to have an advocate, in this case Trump, in Congress, which they have opened up their coffers to make sure that this is all going to work through, to get this basically sorted out in their favor, oppressing the European Union altogether. That is the starting point in this, which plays into this. And that was directly of what J.D. Vance was pointing out to when he went to the Munich Security Conference. He represented the interest of those 2-3 corporations, of these two men, predominantly. Now, I was on Facebook, I think from 2009 on until 2019, and I went off it because I looked at Zuckerberg's empire there, and I didn't think that I needed to have him being able to gain the rights to pictures I post, or, make money because I wasn't paying anything for it in terms of advertisement and stuff like this, by exploiting my personal behaviors and my likes and dislikes. That was probably one of the predominant reasons. The other is most of my friends from my high school days over in Germany, except for one person, are not on Facebook. They have no social media presence. So I'm like in that age category, which is sort of, we are not into the social media business. This here is really my only channel. I have the automotive channel, the HO scale model railroad channel, and this channel here, and my car channel. But this is not really social media, as we're, not really communicating as we do on Facebook or on those platforms. And I'm not interested in going back to it. I have a Twitter account. I never use it. I use it only to log in, to be able to see Twitter posts when something happens, when events unfold, and I can then check the the number sign and then pull this up and see what actually happens, what people are posting in terms of pictures or videos, catastrophes, natural disasters, accidents, political events, demonstrations, all of that stuff, riots, what have you. This way you can get a pretty good view of it, but I don't post anything. Whatever I think I need to share or I want to share, you will find here on YouTube, because I found YouTube the most liberal environment and the less intrusive on collecting personal information in general, either from people like me who make videos or trying to make videos. It was better a attempt at this. My editing skills are not very good. And, or for the user, for the watcher, where you can limit this and you can use the incognito mode and all of that stuff. So that is a more liberal environment, which I would call it libertarian type environment. And I give Google and YouTube, kudos for that. But this is basically now what led to this. So now why didn't they discuss the Ukraine? Why it's a security conference? Well, the United States, we here in the United States, have a profound understanding of the First Amendment if it comes to freedom of speech. So the freedom of speech goes into several different ways in terms of vulgarity or, basically denouncing another person or calling someone names and stuff like this is acceptable. Now we have to remember that all of these laws, whether they are in Germany with the basic law, with the German constitution, which prohibits hate speech, or here in the United States with the ability to write things, predominantly the freedom of speech, developed at a time where we had only a printing press, where people had never heard of the internet. Radio came at the time when the hate speech laws in Germany came into effect. And television was there. But so the broad public, the individual, never really had the means to assert their opinion, no matter how pleasant or how hateful it was just not there. You could go to the local bar and voice your opinion, which some people did when they sat around, on the table and they're starting to politicize, and they would, this guy is this and that, and the other guy is this and that. That was acceptable because it was not recorded and it was not preserved in history. Now, the problem, for instance, with Facebook is, unless you delete your Facebook account, that when someone leaves a comment, it is very difficult to remove that comment. If it is hate speech, because now you have to ask Facebook to intervene, or on Instagram. Here on YouTube, I have more control over the comment section where I can actually fully disable it, or I can filter out already certain words so to eliminate spam and that sort of stuff. But I haven't even needed this for my channel. And that is very pleasant, not having to censor anything, because I really don't want to censor comments, but I also don't want to be assaulted verbally in the comment section. If that should happen, I will remove the comment because I think it is inappropriate. But this is my personal page here, basically, where I can determine this. People can post their own opinions and start their own channel and voice their opinions. That is fine. I may not agree with it. You may not agree with what I say, and that's okay too. But that's the part of democracy. So we both have the same platform. We have different opinions, but we don't have to get tangled up with each other. And this way, we can have peace. So now you can say what you want to say and share this, and I can share what I would like to share. And I can get likes, or people will scroll and move on to the next video if they don't care for it. Maybe I'm not good looking enough. I think I am. No, I'm just kidding. But, that kind of stuff. Now, why didn't they talk about the Ukraine? The issue here then is that we had already, back when Trump was in his first term, that he was trying to withhold funds in the Ukraine or to the Ukraine because of the engagement of Biden or Biden's son in there. This whole fraud scheme, the whole skimming stuff, and all of these things were part of that overall picture. And now with Musk running that DOGE, D-O-G-E, Department of Government Efficiency, they have really gone into the financial side in this from top to bottom in several different departments and at the Treasury. The Treasury pays out about $8 trillion a year through their payment system, to their computerized payment system. And whether it's tax refunds, Social Security checks, all the government contracts, anything what gets paid by the government goes through the department or the Treasury. And they have gained full access to the system, and they're trying now to figure out where there is fraud involved and where there's not fraud involved. And this plays a part into this, trying to save money so we can get the budget down and get the interest payments. That this whole financial system has to be kind of reworked and kind of gotten back in balance. Otherwise, it will kind of derail out of balance. There's no question about it. In this process, now some experts believing here in the United States that we may run into a constitutional crisis in the case that Trump does not obey any court orders. So if he instructs or overrides a judge or the Supreme Court, for that matter, if they rule against him with some of these executive orders he has issued, that could create a constitutional crisis here in the United States, and I'm not kidding you. On the other hand, is Trump and Musk themselves have really nothing to gain personally from this, other than Musk getting paid by the government for his SpaceX program. And interestingly enough, is the majority of his Tesla car buyers are predominantly Democratic voters. So in this sense, with him cutting all these Democrats, primarily NGOs and God knows what else, out of the payments, that they're basically stopping these payment programs, is basically he's cutting off his customer base from their income to purchase his vehicles. This is how crazy this whole thing is. Now, I've said before that I'm not necessarily a person who would work for Elon Musk or one of his companies, not because I dislike Elon Musk or I have any ill feelings towards him. It is just his business style is not exactly the environment I personally would like to work in. You know, there's other people who don't like to work in strip clubs or in bars because they don't like alcohol, they don't like to deal with drugs. Everyone has their own preference, you know, in what kind of a job you get and where you work or what company you work for. Some people have a desire to work for this company because they can identify with the brand and they love the brand and they would love to work there and that sort of stuff, you know. This is more where I'm coming from with this. And so Elon Musk is basically jeopardizing his Tesla operation, not just here in the United States, but also in Europe, because those people he's now offending with his statements, together with Trump and J.D. Vance, are basically his customers. I don't think the AfD in Germany or their voter base are a big supporter of Tesla vehicles, you know. I know other people who bought Tesla vehicles, and they're looking now at this, what Musk is doing, and they're wondering, you know, what am I going to do? I'm driving a Tesla vehicle. So I'm kind of showing a support now. The vehicle Tesla is, you know, directly connected to Musk. What has that to do with the security conference? Well, this all kind of plays together in this whole thing. Now, we will see here now in the coming weeks and months, with Trump leading this negotiation with Russia, where they're trying to figure out if they even can negotiate something, then they will probably trying to figure out how to involve the Europeans. At this point, and Marco Rubio, our foreign minister now, explained in 60 Minutes on Sunday, no, Face the Nation, he explained to us that he was looking, they're trying to even to figure out if it is even possible at this point to start a negotiation by talks. Because at this point everything has broken down so far that the United States and Russia do not have fully working diplomatic channels in Moscow and in Washington. And this will make it very difficult to even trying to figure out if you can even negotiate or starting to negotiate something. So we're in the process of just feeling this entire thing out. There's nothing more to be discussed. The Europeans think that they're left out. The Europeans have not been left out because there's no negotiations going on at this point. We're in a pre-stage where the Russians are trying to figure out if they can talk and deal with the Americans, and the Americans are trying to figure out and feel out if they can deal with the Russians. If it is even possible to actually start a negotiation, the negotiations can then break down. There's no guarantee in any of this. But at this point, it is just trying to figure out if they can even start talking, negotiating with each other. That means the American embassy in Moscow has to be fully staffed again, and the Russian embassy in Washington, since Biden sent most of these people home and then the Russians sent everyone home, have to be reestablished first in order to have fully diplomatic relations before you can even start talking about a negotiations process. This is why there was nothing to be talked about in Munich at the time when J.D. Vance went there, to the surprise of the European leaders who were present on Friday. It shouldn't come to a surprise if you understand diplomacy and interrelations between two countries, not just the United States and Russia, but once you have severed diplomatic relations with a nation or between nations, first of all, you have to reestablish the diplomatic relations before you can actually pursue any serious negotiation, not just about a peace or a ceasefire, but anything has to happen on a diplomatic level with established diplomatic relations. Now, I have said probably everything. Now, the last thing I forgot to mention is, why am I not the biggest fan of the AfD? The AfD is deemed to be a right-wing party by most people in Germany. Many surveys I've read they basically vote in Germany that they would have not voted for Donald Trump because of what he said during his campaigns, of what was presented over in Germany and that sort of stuff. To even understand the issue with the AfD could be a completely different video of probably an hour length, but I want to give you the idea here. And this is why the left wing is so radicalized about this anti-AfD, and the Christian Democrats have kind of joined that choir there. In 1919, so shortly after, a few months after the German monarchy collapsed and Kaiser Wilhelm had abdicated, we had basically two parties which represented the labor movement, or which basically got their votes out of the labor movement. The labor movement was the largest electoral group of voters in Germany at that time, in the Weimar Republic. So the Social Democrats and the Communists were the two main ones. Then came Adolf Hitler with, or not, but the DKP, the Deutsche, what was it, DAP, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the German Workers' Party, which then evolved, once Hitler joined them, into the NSDAP, which became the third Workers' Party. So you had the Socialists as the Workers' Party, you had the Communists as a Workers' Party, and you had the Nazis as a Workers' Party. There were a few other ones, but those were the three predominant ones. As the 1920s and the Weimar Republic unfolded and further progressed, the Socialists and the Communists were basically international workers' union, so to speak, based on this, I think, I forgot who said this, Arbeiter aller Länder vereinigt euch, or something, workers of all countries unite. And the Nazis were only interested in the German workers. So they were speaking, that was a nationalist workers' union. That was the big opposite of the two, to the Socialists and the Democrats. And during our 1920s and the end of the 1920s, these three parties, or their, for the Nazis, it was the SA, the Communists had a, strong arm, and so did the Socialists, got into fierce street battles in Berlin and Dresden and other large cities where there was a big labor movement. In the end, when Adolf Hitler took over with the help of the conservative movement in Hindenburg, and he abolished basically the constitution of the Weimar Republic, the first people he went after was the Socialists and the Communists. These were the first people who got arrested, picked up all of the opponents from the street fights they had. Back in those days in the 1920s, were their arch enemy. It was basically the labor movement, the entire labor movement represented by these three parties, was in a huge turmoil. When you read the manifest of the AfD today, there is a lot of resemblance in this which reminds you of a labor movement. And this is where the similarities then come from. It's a nationalist movement and it's a labor movement, with wages and this, that, and the middle stuff. So there is some similarity there. That is not a party who is interested in free market capitalism. That is for sure. Social market, what we have over there, and that sort of stuff. So this is where the resemblance to the Nazis come into context. And of course, the Green Party being left, and the Socialist and the Linke, or the left, and Sarah Wagenknecht, they're all going to oppose this. And Merz with the Christian Democrats and Söder with the Socialists, Christian Socialist Union in Bavaria, have virtually no other choice but to join the choir if they want to form a coalition either with the Green or with the Red, the Socialist Party, after next Sunday. So they have to separate them to be in line to be able to talk with these people. If they cannot form a coalition after the election on Sunday, they either gonna, with the Socialists or with the Green Party, or all three of them together, then you will have a real problem, similar like what you have in Austria. And then Merz could go to the AfD, even though he said he wouldn't do this, and then starting to negotiate with them. And that is probably not going to work the same way it did not work out in Austria between the FPÖ and the ÖVP. The two, center-right and right, did not work out. So Austria, several weeks, months after the election, still has no government, no leadership, so to speak. And there's a very, very good potential for this to be happening in Germany as well, that Friedrich Merz is going to be the winner of the election, with the CDU maybe getting 29 to 31%, somewhere around there. But if they cannot come to compromises between the former coalition, then there is no government, and we may have another election in 3 or 6 months from now. That is a real possibility. Now, I covered a lot of territory, and of course these videos are a little bit longer. I appreciate your patience, and I hope that these videos are helpful to you to get a better understanding and see some different perspectives from across the pond, so to speak, since I kind of have a better feeling for both sides since I live here and I grew up over there. Understanding the mentalities and what is behind it, the socio-economic structures and that kind of stuff. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment. Other than that, I wish you a good night, and I'm still working on the videos, on the 2 videos about the Prince Albrecht Palais, and they're in the works and they will be coming. So I hope you're looking forward to them, and I hope they're gonna be nice. And I'm gonna trying to make those pictures longer when I show them while I'm talking. I know in the video yesterday they were a little bit short, and I have to apologize, but I'm a newbie at video editing with this kind of stuff, and I'm doing this on my iPhone because I lack elaborate Apple big-time computer stuff with Photoshop and Adobe and these kind of things. Anyway, I wish you a good night.